My name is Rachel, and I had worked at the same company for the past 8 years. The first few years were amazing. I was promoted, recognized for my hard work, and felt truly valued by my boss. But that was before the changes started. It began slowly at first, with small cutbacks on raises, then fewer bonuses, and eventually no raises at all. But the real turning point came when I began job hunting. After being denied my rightful raises for 3 years, I had decided that enough was enough. I was smart, capable, and had a lot to offer. I knew I could do better than being stuck at a company that didn't value me. So I started discreetly looking for new opportunities. What I didn't expect, however, was how quickly things would unravel. One Monday, after a weekend spent preparing for a potential interview, I came into the office ready to start my week. But when I walked in, the energy felt different. My boss, Claire, was waiting for me in her office. I could see her pacing nervously as I approached. "Rachel," she began, her tone sharp, "we need to talk." I immediately felt a cold sweat begin to beat on my forehead. I knew what was coming. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. I had always been an ambitious worker, but I'd never expected my job search to be used against me. Claire went on to explain that she had discovered I had been quietly applying to other companies behind her back. And then, without any warning or consideration for my years of hard work, she said the words that would change everything. "Rachel, I'm going to have to let you go." As I stood there, frozen by Jason's words, the room seemed to close in around me. I could hear the sounds of the ceremony in the background, the celebratory cheers and laughter, the clinking of glasses, the rustling of fancy clothes, but none of it mattered anymore. Nothing in that moment could drown out the sickening feeling in my stomach. This wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. It wasn't just about Jason walking away from our family. It was about the timing, the coldness, the lack of respect. Our daughter's graduation, her biggest day, was being overshadowed by his need to tear everything down. I had never felt so humiliated, so exposed. The worst part was that Jason didn't even seem to care. His face was calm, like he had already made his peace with this decision. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look sad. He looked detached, as though he had already moved on. I blinked, trying to steady myself. Not here, not today. I wasn't going to let him take away this moment from Isabella. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and I wasn't about to let Jason's decision ruin it. As I forced myself to smile, trying to hold it together for Isabella, she caught my eye. Her face went pale when she saw the look on mine. She knew something was wrong, and in that instant, I knew I had to protect her from the fallout. "Mom? Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice shaking as she stepped closer. I could feel her tiny hand grip mine, her fingers trembling with fear. Forcing myself to be strong, I bent down to her level, smiling through the tears that threatened to spill. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice soft but firm, "this isn't your fault. I need you to listen to me. Today is your day. Nothing is going to take away your shine." Jason, standing across the room, gave no indication that he cared how our daughter was feeling. His eyes were fixed on me, cold and indifferent. I knew right then that I couldn't count on him anymore. This wasn't just about a moment of frustration. This was about a deep, growing rift in our marriage. Jason had checked out, emotionally, and now he was trying to tear apart everything we had built. I turned my focus back to Isabella. This was the most important thing. Her education, her future, her happiness. None of that was going to be overshadowed by his selfishness. "I'm here for you, always," I whispered, giving her a tight hug. "We'll deal with this later. Right now, we celebrate you." The rest of the guests were watching now, waiting for some sort of reaction from either of us, but I refused to let Jason have the last word. As I looked around the room, I saw all the support I needed in the faces of our friends and family, those who truly cared. It wasn't about the man who was walking away. It was about the people who would stay, the ones who would stand by us no matter what. This was not the end. I took a deep breath and smiled at Isabella once again. "Let's enjoy your night, baby. We've got a lifetime to look forward to." The room was still, the air thick with tension. I could feel the weight of my husband's words hanging over me. Jason stood at the front, his face stone cold, not giving me any room for a response. It felt like the world had come to a halt, and in that moment, I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or just walk out of that room. But I couldn't let him win. Not like this. Not today. My daughter, Isabella, had been smiling just moments before, but now her face had fallen. The joy of her graduation day was quickly turning into something I couldn't control, and it made me want to fight back even harder. Jason's announcement wasn't just a betrayal to me, it was a betrayal to our family. It was a betrayal to Isabella, to everything we had worked for. I stood up slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. I could feel my hands trembling, but I wouldn't let him see how much this was affecting me. I wasn't going to let him make me look weak. "Jason," I said, my voice a little louder now. "You can't just do this. You can't walk away from everything like it's nothing." He didn't respond immediately, but I could see the slight shift in his expression. Maybe for the first time, he realized that I wasn't going to back down. "Bianca," Jason said, his voice a little more controlled now. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've made my decision and nothing is going to change it." I felt my chest tighten. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't just that he was leaving, it was the coldness in his voice, the way he was acting like I didn't matter at all anymore. How had it come to this? How had we gotten here? "Jason, this is our daughter's day," I said, my voice softer now, though there was still an edge to it. "Do you really think it's right to do this now, in front of everyone?" He didn't answer. His eyes flicked around the room, almost like he was waiting for someone to back him up. But no one did. Our family was silent, unsure of what to do next. Isabella, who had been standing by my side, finally spoke up, her voice small but fierce. "Why, Dad?" she asked. "Why now? Why today?" Jason's face hardened, and he turned to her. "I'm sorry, Isabella, I can't do this anymore." His voice was flat, and there was no warmth left in it. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I could feel Isabella's heart breaking, and it shattered mine. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my daughter, about the family we had built together. Jason had torn it apart in a single moment, and there was no going back from this. I wanted to say more, to scream at him for doing this, for shattering everything in front of our daughter. But instead, I took a deep breath. I realized that it wasn't worth it anymore. Fighting with him wasn't going to change anything. Instead, I looked over at Isabella, who was still standing there, her arms crossed in front of her, looking like she was ready to collapse. I had to be strong for her now. "Sweetheart," I said gently, walking over to her, "this isn't your fault. This is between your father and me. We'll work through it. You don't need to carry this weight." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with confusion and sadness. "Why would he do this, Mom?" I knelt down in front of her, cupping her face in my hands. "I don't know, darling, but I promise you we will get through this. We are stronger than this." As much as I wanted to break down, I knew I couldn't. I needed to show Isabella that we would be okay, that we could weather this storm together. I wasn't going to let this break us. As Jason's words sank in, I stood frozen, trying to process the enormity of what he had just said. My body was trembling, my heart pounding, but I couldn't allow myself to break down in front of our daughter. Not today, not on her day. Isabella, who had been eagerly waiting for this moment for years, looked at me with wide eyes, confusion and hurt written all over her face. She had just graduated. Her whole future lay ahead of her, and I couldn't believe Jason would do this to her. To us. On a day that should have been filled with nothing but pride and joy, he had chosen to announce the end of our marriage. For a moment, I looked around the room. Our family, friends, and colleagues who had come to celebrate our daughter were now standing in shocked silence, unsure of how to react. Jason, my husband of 20 years, was standing there, his face hard and determined, as if he had made up his mind and there was no going back. But I wasn't going to let him control this moment, not anymore. I wasn't going to let him ruin our daughter's big day. "Jason," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "How dare you do this here? This is her day, not yours. You don't get to take that from her, not after everything we've been through." The room was still. No one knew what to say. The air was thick with tension. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let him dictate the course of this day. Jason's eyes narrowed, a look of irritation flickering across his face. "Bianca," he started, his voice rising. "I've thought about this for a long time. I can't keep pretending. I can't keep living this lie." "You can't keep pretending?" I repeated, incredulous. "What lie, Jason? That we've been a family? That we've been a team? You've been checked out for years. Don't act like this is some sudden revelation." I could feel my anger rising, the hurt and betrayal mixing with the years of unspoken resentment. He had checked out long before this day. The emotional distance had grown over time, and now, on the most important day of our daughter's life, he was ready to walk away. I couldn't let him do this. Not to me. Not to Isabella. "You're not going to ruin this," I said, my voice low but filled with conviction. "We are going to get through this, and you're not going to be the one who decides how this story ends." Jason stood there, silent for a moment, as if processing my words. His gaze softened for the briefest second, but then it hardened again. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he said with a shrug, as if it was all so easy for him. "But this is what I want." And just like that, he turned and walked away from the table. He didn't even look back. I stood there, my heart in my throat, trying to steady my breath. The reality of what just happened was sinking in. My husband, the father of my children, had just walked out of our lives, without warning, without any consideration for the devastation he had caused. But in that moment, I wasn't going to let myself crumble. For Isabella, for me, for our future. I had spent too many years trying to make everyone else happy, trying to keep this family together at the expense of my own happiness. It was time to stop. Time to take control of my own life. I walked over to Isabella, who was now sitting at the edge of the table, her face pale. I knelt down beside her, taking her hand in mine. "Honey," I said softly, "I'm so sorry. This isn't your fault. We'll be okay. You and me. We're stronger than this." She looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "But why? Why did Dad do this? Why today?" I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. "I don't have all the answers, sweetie," I said, wiping away a tear from her cheek, "but I promise you we're going to be okay. I'm here for you. And we'll get through this together." As we sat there in the aftermath of the chaos Jason had left behind, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new, something better. I had been living in the shadow of someone else's choices for too long, and now it was time to build my own path. The days that followed Jason's announcement felt like a blur. I barely slept, and when I did, I woke up with a sense of unease, unsure of what would come next. It wasn't just the shock of what Jason had said that was overwhelming. It was the sheer weight of it all. This was not how I had imagined Isabella's graduation day. I had dreamed of this moment being a celebration, but now it felt tainted by betrayal and humiliation. But as the initial shock began to wear off, something inside me started to shift. I couldn't let him do this to me, to our family, and to our daughter. Jason had clearly made up his mind, but I had one thing he didn't. I still had control over my own life. I wasn't going to let him dictate my future. I wasn't going to let him define me. Isabella was quiet in the days after the graduation. I could see the hurt in her eyes, the confusion, and the pain of what her father had done, but I knew something that she didn't yet. This wasn't the end. This was an opportunity for us to rebuild, to find ourselves again without the weight of his indifference. I tried to focus on Isabella's needs, doing everything I could to make sure she knew she was loved and supported. I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault. This was a decision that Jason had made, and it was his choice. She couldn't carry that burden. I couldn't carry it alone either. One evening, after she had come home from spending time with some friends, she sat down next to me on the couch, her head resting on my shoulder. "Mom," she whispered, her voice soft and unsure, "do you think Dad will ever come back?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her that everything would be okay, that somehow this was all going to work out. But I knew better than to make promises I couldn't keep. What I did know, what I was sure of, was that we would be okay. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "But I do know that you and we're going to be just fine. We don't need anyone to tell us who we are or what we're worth. We have each other, and we always will." She looked up at me with those big brown eyes, full of uncertainty, but also a flicker of hope. "I'm scared, Mom," she admitted. "I know," I whispered, "but I promise you, we're not going to let fear control us. We're stronger than that." The days that followed were difficult, but slowly I began to see a way forward. Jason's absence was painful, but it also opened up space for us to heal. I had spent so many years giving, without ever asking for anything in return. Now I was learning what it meant to give to myself, to rebuild my own dreams. I wasn't just rebuilding our family, I was rebuilding me. I decided to take a leave from work, something I had never done before. It was a luxury I had put off for years, but now it felt like the right time. I needed to rediscover myself outside of the roles I had played as a wife and mother. I took up yoga, started painting again, and began to rediscover passions I had set aside for too long. It wasn't an easy journey, but little by little, I was starting to feel like I was coming back to life. And then, one day, a phone call changed everything. It was from my lawyer. "Bianca," he said, "I have some news. Jason has filed for divorce, but he's also made an offer that could give you a solid financial future moving forward. He wants to settle things quickly." At first, the idea of a settlement seemed like a good idea. It would mean putting an end to the mess that had been our marriage. But as the conversation continued, I realized something. This wasn't about the money. This was about my peace, my freedom, and my ability to build a future where I wasn't tethered to someone who no longer cared. The next few weeks were filled with legal meetings, discussions, and decisions, but through it all, one thing became clear. I was no longer dependent on Jason. His decision to leave had forced me to take control of my life, and in a strange way I was grateful for that. Isabella and I started to make plans for the future, and while there were still moments of pain, there was also a sense of excitement. I was rediscovering my own potential, something I hadn't done in years. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I looked at my daughter, Isabella, who stood there frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Her graduation, the event that was supposed to be her shining moment, had been overshadowed by the very person who should have been supporting her the most, her father. I was beyond angry, but I knew that in front of Isabella I couldn't break down. I had to be strong, not just for her, but for myself too. I refused to let Jason's cruel words dictate the rest of my life. I had worked too hard, loved too deeply, and invested too much into our family for him to simply throw it all away. I turned back to Jason, who was still standing there, eyes filled with frustration, his hands trembling in fury. I could see the arrogance in his posture, the certainty in his voice. But the more I looked at him, the more I realized something. He didn't have the power anymore. "You want to leave?" I said slowly, my voice steady, though the storm inside me was building. "Fine, go. But you will not make this about you. This is Isabella's day. This is her achievement, and I'm not going to let you take that away from her." Jason seemed to falter, the coldness in his eyes wavering for just a moment, but he quickly recovered, his pride refusing to show any sign of weakness. "Bianca, I don't want to hurt you, but you've got to understand," he began. But I cut him off. I don't have to understand anything," I interrupted, standing up from the chair and walking towards him. "I've spent years trying to understand you. But not anymore. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Isabella, who had been standing quietly by my side, suddenly spoke. Mom, why is he doing this? Her voice cracked as she tried to process everything. The hurt in her eyes was like a dagger to my heart. I took her hand in mine, holding it firmly. Sweetheart, this isn't your fault. Your dad is the one who chose this. But we don't need him to define who we are. We're strong. We've always been strong. And together, we will keep moving forward. Nothing can take away the love we have for each other. For a moment, Jason stood there, silent, his face full of anger and regret. But he didn't speak. Instead, he walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The man I had loved for so long was now a stranger to me. I had given him everything, and yet, in the end, he had chosen to walk away, leaving me with the burden of his choices. But as I looked at Isabella, her tear-streaked face slowly starting to show a faint smile, I knew that everything would be okay. We would be okay. I pulled her into a tight hug, feeling her small body shake with emotion. We've got this, sweetie, I whispered. No matter what happens, we'll get through this together. This is your day, and nothing is going to take that away from you. We didn't need Jason to make our lives complete. We had each other, and that was enough. The night ended quietly, the weight of the day settling over us, but there was a sense of peace in knowing that we had come through this together. The road ahead would be tough, but we were stronger than we had ever been. The future was ours to shape, and as I tucked Isabella into bed later that night, I made a promise to myself. I would never again let anyone take away my peace, my happiness, or my strength. I would stand tall, no matter the storm, because no matter what happened, I knew that I would always be enough.